For 18 years, the Israelites were under the iron hand of the Moabites. Their formerly great land was now a land of suffering, ruled by a tyrant named Eglon. But during a period of tyranny, a hero arose, a man unlike the others. A left-handed fighter from the tribe of Benjamin. His name was Ehud, and his mission, to free his people at all costs. In the land of Israel, among the 12 tribes, there was one known for its fierce warriors, Benjamin. From this tribe, a boy was born who would one day change the fate of his people. His name was Ehud. But unlike many of the warriors in his tribe, Ehud had a trait that set him apart, something that made others whisper behind his back. He was left-handed. Among the sons of Benjamin, warriors were trained from a young age. Ehud's grip awkward as he forced himself to wield a sword in his right hand. He lunged at his opponent, but his strike was clumsy. Instructor, unimpressed, said,
"Your right hand is weak, Ehud. Train harder, or you'll never wield a sword like a true Benjamite."
Ehud's gaze dropped to his left hand, steady, strong, eager to grip the sword. But in a world built for right-handed warriors, it was a hand that held no honor. He was left-handed, a trait that set him apart, a trait that made him weak in the eyes of his people. But what they saw as a flaw would one day become his greatest weapon. In a dense forest, Ehud stood before a thick tree trunk, carved a rough target into its bark. Night after night, he trained, not to match his peers, but to surpass them. Not with brute strength, but with precision, with strategy. A cool morning arrived. The instructor called for sparring partners. Ehud stepped forward. The boys whispered he had never won. That day, he gripped the sword in his right hand, just as they expected. His opponent smirked. The match began. Ehud feigned awkwardness. His right-handed struck slow, predictable. His opponent lunged, sensing an easy victory. But then, Ehud switched to his left hand. His movements became suddenly faster, unpredictable. A struck to the ribs, a swift parry, and in seconds, his opponent was on the ground, breathless, his sword knocked from his grasp. The crowd fell silent. The instructor watched, unreadable. Ehud stepped back, his chest rising and falling, his left hand still gripping the sword. For the first time, they had seen him not as weak, but as something else entirely. Not broken, but different. Not predictable, but dangerous. Ehud had turned his weakness into a weapon. And soon, he would use it to change history. Years passed, and Ehud rose not only as a warrior but as a master of the craft that gave warriors their power. After completing his military training, he took up the hammer and tongs, becoming a blacksmith. He studied the way steel bent under heat, how a blade could be shaped for speed, for silence, for death. A common sword was too large, too obvious. A single-edged blade could be deflected. But a double-edged dagger, that was a weapon made for certainty. The weight of his mission pressed on him. This blade was more than a weapon, it was a promise. The time for war had come. And Ehud was ready. The Israelites sent him with tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Among the weary tribute-bearers, one man carried something more than gold and grain. He carried the weight of a nation. And he carried a blade. Inside the palace, King Eglon lounged on an extravagant throne. His massive frame sank into silk cushions. His fingers were greasy from feasting, his expression smug as he surveyed the tribute. He barely acknowledged the Israelites who bowed before him, until Ehud stepped forward.
"O mighty king, I have a secret message for you, a message from God."
Eglon's curiosity is piqued. He straightened slightly, wiping his hands.
"A secret message?"
The thought amused him. He waved a dismissive hand to his guards. The guards exchanged glances but obeyed. The massive doors closed behind them, sealing the chamber in silence. It was just Ehud and the king. Eglon had let down his guard. He expected words, not steel. He expected obedience, not judgment. But judgment had come. Ehud suddenly lunged forward. He reached with his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh and plunged it into the king's belly. With a single stroke of the dagger, the tyrant fell, not by an army, but by the hand of one man. A left-handed man. Eglon slumped backwards, his massive body collapsing onto the throne. The room was still. Ehud stood motionless for a moment, his chest rising and falling. Then, his eyes shifted to the door. He moved quickly, retrieving his dagger and slipping away through the shadows. He locked the chamber door behind him, sealing the dead king inside. Outside, the guards waited, oblivious. Minutes passed. They glanced at each other, confused by the silence. By the time they found their king, Ehud had already vanished into the hills of Ephraim. And by nightfall, the call to arms had begun. The oppressor was dead. The deliverance of Israel had begun. History taught us that heroes rose not because they sought greatness, but because they answered the call of destiny. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons for more inspiring stories.